Welcome to a new week, friends. I've got only a few live streams this week, and then I'll be taking a bit of a break, but I am really glad you're here. And just a reminder, all of these episodes will be released kind of over a period of time every Tuesday and Thursday, and you can find them at bizbookpublishinghub.com, which is also where you'll find lots of other resources for authors. Without any further delay, let me introduce this week's panel. Feeling overwhelmed with marketing your book? You're not alone. Writing the book was challenging, but now the process of getting it out to your audience might seem just as daunting. That's why I always say marketing isn't about shouting to the masses, it's about connecting with the right people. You don't need to sell millions of copies to create a lasting impact. You need a strategic plan to engage with your readers and draw them into your world. The key is building genuine connections and positioning your book as the gateway to the value you bring in other areas of your business. As a book launch strategist, I help authors do that. Whether it's through tailored launch teams, virtual events, or content strategy, I can help you create a plan that turns your readers into clients, partners, or even evangelists for your ideas. Whether you're just getting started writing a book, have a book ready to publish, or are thinking about a relaunch, I suggest you schedule a complimentary book launch brainstorming session at robbiesamuels.com/book launch support. Now, before we jump into today's panel, here's a quick word from our sponsor. I am thrilled to introduce today's panelists who will share their best strategies and lessons learned from marketing their books. Krzyzek wrote Made to Sell, Creating Websites That Convert, which provides essential strategies and insights for transforming your website into a powerful marketing tool that attracts traffic, builds your brand, and drives revenue. Kris Putnam-Walkerly wrote Confident Giving, Sage Advice for Funders from one of philanthropy's top advisors, a comprehensive guide to impactful philanthropy, offering practical strategies, expert insights, and inspiring stories to help funders enhance their efforts and drive meaningful change. Rollin wrote Growing Groups into Teams, Real-Life Stories of People Who Get Results and Thrive Together, offering practical strategies and real-life examples to transform a group of individuals into a highly effective and productive team, focusing on engagement, accountability, inclusion, and building trust to drive organizational success. Please join me in welcoming Ari, Kris, and Pam. Ari, I'm going to kick this off to you. Tell us a little bit about the audience that you had in mind for your book, and welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me here today, Robbie. Gosh, my audience for the book. When we wrote the book, it's really more about making sure that more businesses knows exactly what they need to do before they build a website. Oftentimes, people come to us, and this past 13 years, we have seen over 200 people come to us and say that I have my website, but I don't know what to do with it. And it all started out with just a checklist, right? You got your business name, you got your logo, you got your website all done, but there isn't a strategy. So the book really teaches, what do you need to do in order to connect your branding into digital experiences to make sure that it works for your business. So no more just having a brochure like website. It's more about strategic website that can get you leads, get you sales and conversion you want.
I am so excited to dig into this in a few minutes because I imagine a lot of people approach a lot of things without strategy. I'm guilty of that, and I talk about that a lot with my clients. But I also know that reading a book like this would probably make someone a much stronger prospect and an easier prospect to work with when they become a client. So brilliant use of writing a book. We'll talk more about that sort of theory of writing a book in a moment. But first, let's go over to Kris, actually. And Kris, tell us a little bit about the ideal reader that you had in mind for your book.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, the book is called Confident Giving, and the ideal reader is either high net worth or ultra high net worth philanthropists, or those who are working and leading grant making foundations and corporate giving programs. So it's really people who are giving money away and want to learn how to do that more effectively, because it might seem easy, but if you really want to make an impact on whatever issue or cause that you care about, it actually is a little bit harder than you think. And you're right. Oftentimes people don't think about strategy, but it's really important to have a philanthropic giving strategy.
Yeah, I feel like strategy is the key to this conversation as well. I've actually coached 25-year-olds to start a giving plan, because if you start giving monthly at 25 years old, 25 years later when you're 50, maybe you'll know a little something about what questions you need to ask. So it just get thrown. Don't expect one day to all of a sudden have money. I mean, maybe that happens for some of us, but most of us grow into our wealth. So I love the idea that there's this resource out there for those of us that need to know more about that. I'd love to be part of the ultra wealthy class. I'm not, but like we all have dreams. Pam,
You'll get there.
Pam, what about you? What would you describe as the ideal audience that you had for your book?
Well, you may not be ultra wealthy, but you probably have a team. And we want the insights about building effective teams to be available to everyone who is a leader, who is a member of a team, whether that's at work or in their community, because what we do is really bespoke to leadership teams, often the top team in a company or an NGO. We want this to be able to take those insights to everyone. And of course, we are especially glad to connect with senior execs who may want to become clients and may want to roll this out to the teams in their organizations.
Brilliant. So I'm curious, is this your first book, Pam?
No,
All
the
right.
second book is also about leadership.
So is this the second book you wrote or the first book you wrote?
Yeah, this one's co-authored. In fact, we wrote it as a team. About teams.
So I want to take you a moment back, Pam, to when you were writing your first book, because a lot of people listening, that's where they're at right now. They're at that stage where they're just thinking about getting started. And what were the metrics or the goals that you had for your first book while you were writing it, before you know what you know now? What did you think was important back then? And then kind of in a sentence or two, like what's evolved about your thinking regarding what's important and what's a milestone to pay attention to? So what were you first thinking of as like, oh, I know the book's gonna be a success if only this thing happens?
I was first thinking about sales, like not necessarily for revenue, but for reach. There's a lot better ways to get revenue than writing a book, but what it makes possible in terms of impact and also in terms of consulting clients that come because of it. And I started to value over the years much more the relationships that it put me in touch with, the speaking that came out of it, the clients. And then sort of as you were speaking about earlier with Ari, is the ripeness of the clients. And we see that now with this book about teams, is that once people have read it, they're like ready to work together.
I love that. So I see the evolution that's going there. Ari, I mean, first of all, is this your first book, or is this a book like in a series? Like where's this book situated in your business?
This is my very first book.
Very first book. Okay. Well done. Getting it done. And you know, by the way, often for a first time author, just getting it done is like the goal. So beyond that goal, what were you thinking when you're first getting started writing this book about what was going to be important? Was it sales? Was it reviews? Was it, you know, I don't know, clients? Like what were you paying attention to?
I would say it's similar to Pam's. Like it's mostly to get the reach, right? The target audience reach. It's not so much about the book sales. I think the impact as well as just like making sure that people know that this resource exists and they can plan better for their website. You know, people have come up to me like at networking events, at lunches, or even like at conferences saying that, oh, this is your book, right? I was like, yes. And they just like feel so excited knowing that they now have this strategy to go in and build their website with their team, or maybe they actually do need our help, right? Whatever that might be, it just creates this like, you know, impact that you just felt so happy when you finally hear it from your own readers.
Yeah, there's definitely a piece of credibility that I think anyone who's thinking about writing a book knows the credibility factor, but there's often doors that open that we don't foresee in those early stages. So we'll ask about that in a moment. But first, Kris, again, same question. Is this your first book? Just to make sure. Yes.
This
okay.
book is my first book. I've since wrote a second book.
Okay. I'd love to hear what your thoughts were initially. Were there any particular milestones you were paying attention to?
Yeah, I feel fortunate. I was working with a mentor and a coach at the time who himself has written and published about 60 books and has helped other consultants to write books. And the advice he gave me was kind of similar to what Pam said, which is you're not going to make a lot of money selling books, but you can make a lot of money selling, you know, consulting engagements, with your clients, and the book can help you leverage that and obtain that. And so I found that to be really true. So my metrics was always thinking about clients that I can work with on a consulting advisory basis, be it helping them create foundations or develop their grant making strategies or succession plans for their philanthropy. So for me, it was about marketing the book and promoting the book in a way that leveraged my thought leadership and gave me more credibility, higher kind of reputation in the field. And those are really my goals.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear these responses because, I mean, a lot of times I do have authors who come on this show or who come into my brainstorming complimentary session or something, and they can talk for 5 minutes about their book. And then I ask, well, tell me how the book fits into the overall business strategy. Like if someone's reading your book and they get excited about it, what's the next step for them finding you and then hiring you? And their response half the time is, then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe we should work on that. So I love that you got a mentor to support you in figuring that out from the get-go, Kris. So you were really thinking about that. And it sounds like all three of you had that lens on the book as you were writing it and creating it. There's still always more opportunities that come. But I wanted to shift gears for a second over to reviews, because it's one of my happy places. And Pam's very happy too, because Pam, you're doing a bang up job with this. And it's so rare that I get to come on this show and be like, wow, look at this. This is so cool. So folks who are following along from home, I wanted to share that there are two things that we pay attention to on Amazon. There are ratings and there are reviews.
Yeah.
Ratings are the stars, which you don't need to leave any kind of text. You don't need to buy the book to leave a rating. And then the reviews are the written text. And I look at two things. One is the ratio between written reviews and the overall number of stars, and also whether there's recent posts, like are there recent reviews? So kind of, is there an ongoing process of collecting reviews? And I say all this as someone who's like, my 3 books have over 650 reviews collectively. Like all of my books have 200 plus reviews. This is a thing I focus on for my books, for my authors' books. So you have, for your second book, the one Growing Groups and Teams, Pam, 167 total ratings and 162 written reviews. So 1, wow. 2, wow. So well done. I mean, like 167 to 162, really close ratio of almost every person wrote your review. And I'm curious what your overall thoughts were about getting reviews. I mean, by the way, you also have reviews as recently as September. So September and July, that's great seeing reviews coming in. And some of these reviews are like 5 paragraphs long. People love the book. So Pam, when you were getting started doing the launch for this book, and I know it's built off the success of an earlier book where you also got 148 ratings and 61 reviews. So another great showing. How were you approaching reviews? Who were these from? They're hard to get. How did you get people to actually follow through and write them? Like, what was the strategy here?
Absolutely. So the focus was on building relationships in this process. And that's one of the things that I discovered in my first book, is that much of the work that I got out of the first book were from the 50 people I interviewed for content for the book. And they're people whose quotes I put in, and that whole process reminded them or introduced us to who we are, what we do for them. Okay. So we were thinking about reviews in that light, like not just what cousin could we get to write a review, but which of our client execs or people that we went to grad school with or whatever, whose opinion we would really value. And this is an excuse to reconnect and say, I would love to know what you think about this book. And we sent them a PDF, do not distribute in advance, but we did ask them to buy the book so that it would be verified. Some did, some, and we gave them some cueing about we didn't give them reviews to copy and paste. We gave them some starter prompts, and we gave them some suggestions of how, of sort of what to share, like what would you want somebody, if you were going to hand this book to somebody, what would you say about it?
Mm.
And we had to reinforce, you don't have to read the whole book to write a review. Some people like to do that, but most people do not have time for that. But read enough that you found some value that you really want to share with other people.
Okay, I'm going to just interject here because these are incredibly smart points that I want to underscore. And that piece you said about, it's not about what cousin can write a review. I just, kind of a funny way of saying it. I always point out that a lot of times authors focus on getting, if they realize reviews are important at all, most authors are still thinking number one bestseller is like the goal they have to focus their most energy on. And I see it as a kind of a byproduct of a good launch. Because the ribbon goes away, the bestseller status is not long lasting, and it doesn't impact your business account in a way that like these conversations with the right people in your network can. So it sounds like, Pam, you were really focusing on less the family and friends who don't have budgets, by the way, and don't need the services you're providing, and more past clients, prospective clients, people in your field, people who whose words about your project would resonate. So I think that is really, really smart, because all the effort to get the reviews is not even about the reviews. Maybe for the first like 50, it's about the reviews. But after that, it's really just about building those relationships. So great opportunity to leverage a book in this way, and super smart. Now, how did you, it feels like you happened upon this idea because the first book did that so well, just based on who you interviewed and you saw the results. Is that kind of how you morphed into this idea?
That was it. We also had great support from somebody that Linda Popke, who are primarily, I mean, and what I'm just so excited about is she helped us produce a book that we felt so proud to put in someone's hand, where the layout was good and the cover was on point and the paper felt good. And we worked with an illustrator who we were super excited about, who really created inclusive illustrations for us that, and that feeling when we're so excited to hand somebody a book is everything.
I love this. So Ari, I'm going to come over to you because we talked about this before. So this is an ongoing conversation in a way. And you've got recent reviews as well over the summer, some of them from the authors that we worked with last July. But you've got some reviews that are coming in. And I got to give a shout out to Bruce Shear. I keep seeing him. He does a picture of himself holding a phone with the Kindle book for all the reviews he did for the fellow authors. So whenever I'm checking, I always see his little picture. I'm starting to do that now, because those like they pop to the top, like the ones that have images and videos. So I'm like, oh, that's a simple thing to do. That's very nice. So you have over 20 reviews. You have 27 written reviews and 29 ratings. And to me, focusing on getting more than 20 takes a certain level of effort. Like to get 50, you really need a plan in place. But to even get over 20 is not by accident. Most people hit publish. They're lucky if they get 7 reviews. I actually happened to see a review today on a book that was written by the author. And by the way, for those listening, that's not allowed. That's a good way to get your whole account banned for like writing reviews for your content or a bad review for your competitor's content. Both things are not allowed by you, your family, or your team. So don't do that. But Ari, do tell us a little bit about how you approached getting reviews and what's your thinking as you're kind of going forward, continuing to ask.
Honestly, I'm still learning. So Pam, your insights and experience on that, I'm definitely going to, pull it and bring it to my team. But really, when I started off, I did not know what I was doing, right? To be honest, like writing the first book, it was just like, how do I figure it out? Like, how do I market it? How do I get reviews? How do I get, advanced reader lists? All those things. It's just that, just trial and error, to be honest. I wish I have known you, Robbie, like, back then, which probably will make my life much easier. But really what we ended up doing is that we just reach out to our networks of like business owners, entrepreneurs group, and, people that we know are, excited about this journey that we have with the book. And they're just like willing, like, let me be your first reader. And I will happily, I will be more than happy to just drop in that review for you. So that's what we ended up doing. So I felt like I have a pretty solid network, I felt like, right? So if I do that kind of ask, like people actually do help with it. So reach out to your like local network. Maybe you do have like Chamber of Commerce people that you always, hang out with, or maybe you're part of like other networking groups. So definitely reach out to them too.
Yeah. Just for those who are thinking about doing this, I've discovered that you need about 3 times as many people on your launch team as the number of reviews you want by a specific date. So if you have some plans for like 2 months from now to have 50 reviews, in about 2 weeks from now, you would need 150 people signed up, which means you'd have to ask about 200 people. Now that sounds like a big number, but in reality, our networks are bigger than our email lists. Our networks are bigger than we actually realize they are. It's just like an untapped resource. And one of the things I really help folks do is discover likely prospects and referral partners. I just had a client, Lois Kramer, launch her second edition of her book, Book More Business. She got 131 written reviews and 131 ratings. Every single person wrote a review, which is amazing. But she also asked a lot of people, got about 400 people to say yes, and a third took action in the amount of time we gave them. Kris, I'm going to shift the question a little bit for you. Other than reviews, what's difficult about this process? You were really fortunate to have a mentor kind of guiding you along the way. Where did you feel like you needed to get team members or other supports? Was it hard to get the ideas out of your head? Was it the marketing? Like, what would you kind of point out to someone who maybe hasn't gone through this yet as oh, hey, pothole ahead, you might want to pay attention to this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it starts with mindset, really, and the belief that you actually can write a book or have enough knowledge or content to write a book. And so I think part of it, the hurdle, is getting over that and recognizing that if you add value to your clients, if you add value to your customers, then you can also add value to those same kinds of people through a book. I'd say secondly, I like writing, but a lot of people don't like writing. And I would say, you don't actually have to be a good writer to write a book. There's lots of different kinds of ways to quote unquote write a book. And one of those is, hiring a ghostwriter, someone to interview you, or take other kinds of content and create the book from that. And interestingly, this book, Confident Giving, is a little bit atypical, which meaning that it's actually a compilation of the best of my newsletters from the first 2 years that I wrote the newsletter. So the content was written, and what I did was organize the content into categories and then pick the best articles within those categories, and that really became the content of the book. So I think it's important to think creatively about different ways that you can share the content from the book. And then thirdly, I would say absolutely, you need help. I needed someone to help me, certainly with like the graphic design and the organization of the book, to even explain to me how to, what self-publishing means and how to do that. But also, people to help you with the marketing and the promotion, and just to give you ideas even as to how to do that.
I mean, there's so much to learn about writing a book the first time that I felt like I had to write a second book, like just because I felt like I'd gone to school to learn all this.
Mm-hmm.
You just shared something I think is really interesting and creative, which is the idea of taking existing content, for instance, blogs, and turning into a book. There's a great resource I want to share for this. So earlier we mentioned Linda Popke. Linda Popke and the person I'm about to mention, Kathy Fayak, they're both hub partners. They're founding hub partners, the BizBook Publishing Hub, which means they're experts who help guide entrepreneurs through some phase of the writing, editing, publishing, or marketing process. And Kathy, who's first of all, a great writing coach, guides a lot of authors to publication. She also has a book called Blog to Book with the number 2. And in it, she gives some tips, because one of the downfalls of using pre-existing content is that often we're very repetitive, and certain concepts show up several times, or certain phrasing. And so if you have a really good editor, they'll fix that for you. Otherwise, it really feels like you just cut and paste a bunch of newsletter or newspaper articles, and it doesn't feel like a cohesive book. But if you have someone who can help you make sure that you've got the intro and the outro, so for each section, you've got it nicely organized and there's a flow and it's not repetitive, it's a great way to write a book. Ari, I'm going to come back over to you.
I love that you mentioned having a book editor, because I think that particular help was so helpful when I was going through my book writing, right? Now, my book is actually co-authored, me and my partner, who's also happened to be my husband. So imagine that, right? You're working alongside with your partner, plus your husband, trying to just like combine these two ideas together. And I don't think if it weren't for our book editor, I don't think we'd probably agree on like putting all of the content and making it sounds like a good flow, because that was also a challenge. How do you take a reader to make sure that they understand from the beginning to end, not just like, okay, I get that, but it's not connecting, right? So I don't want it to be a disjointed experience. I want it to be like truly free flowing but also connected, and I think our book editor did such an amazing job on that.
So there's a couple of different types of editors out there. It sounds like you may have been working with a developmental editor, and they're the ones who kind of make sure the whole story has a beginning, middle, and end, that it makes sense, that it flows, that there's not gaps. The other way to be careful about this is to also test your content with prospective readers. My second book has an exercise in there, I guess I'll call it, called Wake Up Your Network, which is how do you find likely prospects and referral partners? Well, when I was coaching and using this, I didn't have all the steps detailed out because I'd give people some general idea, and then we'd meet every week as they were doing it, and I'd fill in the gaps. But if you're writing it down, it turns out what I had written down was steps 1, 4, 7, and 10, which is not nearly as helpful without me there to talk to them. And so by workshopping this, I held many workshops where I had people use the content for 2 weeks and then come to the meeting to discuss it and ask questions. I realized I had actually 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C, and that helped it be more useful for people who were actually going to be reading this book when I'm not standing right there. So those are some really good ideas for kind of bringing the content to life and making it as useful as possible. And also just not writing in secret so that you're getting feedback as you go. Pam, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to shift a little bit here to talk about some marketing strategies. And in particular, I know we don't really focus on book sales. I know that, like, you made a point about that. It's not really the number one way to make money from a book. But there are some things that you've probably done that have helped you either have a spike or a surge in individual book sales or bulk book sales, or some other creative way of getting large amounts, whether it's for money or not, getting large amounts of your book out into people's hands. Is there a particular time that you can think of that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I could rattle off a few, and then if there's any you want to ask about. Actually having a launch party, like a real launch party, and inviting fabulous people from different parts of our lives and our work lives and different clients, and introducing them to each other. We had nearly 100 people. It was such a delight. And those people became real ambassadors for the book. And then we give extra books to our client executives. And I love it when a client said to me, oh, by the way, I passed your extra book to our lead investor and said, you really have to take a look at this for the rest of your portfolio. And we also make offers to our clients that if there's somebody that they think should have the book, a cross-functional partner, somebody else, then the book. Plus, and this we didn't know before we published the book. We didn't write it as a workbook. But now we have our clients use specific chapters in some of the work that we do. Take a look at the chapter at responsibility and accountability. Would you get this book for your team so they can take a look at the chapter on building trust? So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love this thought process around like integrating it into the work that you're doing, making it valuable, gifting an extra book to people to pass along. Ari, did I see you just waving your hand? Come on in.
Yes, I'm so excited you mentioned this. Okay. Yes, the sales is not the top priority, right? But I felt like I want to get more people, exactly access to my book. So one of the ways is hosting that launch party, but I also sponsor events, right? Like conferences or where I know that my target audience is going to be. I just talk to the conference, organizer or programming leader and say that, hey, I would like to donate the book. Would you like my book. So they would say like, of course, yeah, that would be awesome. So I would just like send 100 books, 50 books here and there, and people would get the book. Now, what I also tend to do is that I would slip in a bookmark, and that bookmark has a very particular call to action in it, like review the book on Amazon, so that it has a QR code. So I felt like it really just helped like people knowing that, okay, I get the book, and I have this little reminder, like if I like the book, just add in the review. So I felt like that is really powerful, just to kind of get things in front of your own target audience if you would like to.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a book, you can't do any of these things. So it's like you have to get the book, and then you have to be really creative about having the book. You mentioned the bookmark. I've done bookmarks in two different ways. One of the ways is that I brand it all myself, in which case I would put a QR code or a link written out for whatever the opt-in lead magnet gift was for the book. And then on the back, I write my signature. It was for my first book. It was about networking at conferences. So that one did a lot in person pre-pandemic. So I had my little signature and my like scrawled phrase. So that they got, but I didn't want to sit there every night and like just write my name. But I would walk around the room with a Sharpie in my pocket as we were chatting after, and I would just sign books while we were talking. So I'd probably sign like 3 dozen books just by doing that. But the QR code or the link sent them to my email list. Now, if a company wanted to co-brand, they took on the cost of printing them, in which case I just gave them the signature file with my little scrawled thing, and then they would brand the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's still helpful. It still led them back to me in a lot of ways, and people don't throw books away. So
That's
I love
so
the
smart.
idea of gifting books or offering discounts on both books. And of course, we are all part of the Kindle cross promotion campaign that I'm running. This is something I'm running at least twice a year, debating a third. And it's been a really fun way. We've definitely seen people's books spike in sales. Lots of people hitting number 1, number 2, top 10 of their category. I think last time 70% hit the top 10 in their categories. So definitely movement, like some sales. And it's less about sales, going back to what Pam said. It's more if you use this campaign as kind of a mini relaunch, then you use it as an excuse to go talk to people that maybe you meant to be in touch with or be really engaging with. And you're offering them not just your book for 99 cents, but you're like, by the way, there's like nearly 100 books here. So I'm going to come over here. Kris, I'm curious, as you were writing your book, what the through line was between the book you were writing and the business you have serving the clients who be reading this book. Like, how did you think about they read the book and then they get excited and they start working with you? Was that woven throughout? Do you have calls to action or QR codes or lead magnets or bonus content in the book, contact info? I mean, how did you sort of envision this? And it sounds like having a mentor probably helps you think a little bit about this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the content itself is really geared toward, I think about my clients and the problems that I've helped them with. If it's they don't have a strategy, or they have a strategy, but they're not implementing it and they need help with implementation. If there's, oftentimes there's the wealthy matriarch or patriarch of the family that makes all the decisions, and they want to involve their children who are, 50 years old, right? Adult children, and don't know how. And so the book was really written because it was written in these blogs and these articles to be very practical, kind of provocative and practical insights and steps and tips for how to tackle these things. So it was all aligned with the kinds of ways that I help my clients. I don't think in the first book I was smart enough to do a lot of the things that you've mentioned, but in my second book, I certainly directed as a call to action toward the end to go to the homepage of the book. That book is called Delusional Altruism. And so there's lots of resources. They can download free chapters. There's a free workbook they can download and other kinds of ways that they can get connected with me. But, one of the things that I found to be most helpful, you all have mentioned, giving away books. One of my best marketing strategies was a holiday campaign where I gave away 2 copies of each book. The book is called Confident Giving. I'm giving them this book, and it was right before the holidays. So I actually packaged a beautiful, like a folder with materials about my consulting firm and my speaking engagements, included 2 books that I signed. And literally it was all wrapped in a bow and mailed off to them in a lovely color coordinated envelope. And my goal with that, with a handwritten note that indicated, my goal for this was speaking engagements. So it was, here's a book, 2 copies of this book, one for you, one to give to a colleague. And I'd love to follow up and schedule a call in the next month. I'll reach out to you next week and we can book that call. I have some ideas for how I can help, how I can help you. And then I would diligently follow it up and got a lot of phone calls scheduled in the next 2 months and booked a whole year's worth of speaking engagements. So that was
wow. Doors that open. That is so cool. Also, good follow through. It's a pricey thing. I mean, a lot of what you were just describing costs time and money and energy, and you have to have a plan. You have to follow through. But I'm certain that the amount of money you'll make from all those engagements, like, more than makes that worth it. And if you don't do that effort, then you don't build that pipeline. So a lot of how I think about a launch or a relaunch is about really building a pipeline of people from your network who might be a little bit interested into becoming more interested in what you do, and to ultimately being like super excited to either champion your work or signing up for the work for themselves. I host virtual book launch parties that I design and MC, and a lot of the focus is actually on featuring the author as the expert. So it's less about how successful the book launch was, although we do acknowledge the effort that went into that. But it's more about the future focus of all the ways an author could support prospects. And a lot of that is also bringing in guest speakers to talk about what it's like to work with them. And I interview them, and it's a lot of fun. So whether you do things in person or online or some combination of both different things, I think that's really cool to kind of think about how to get the word out there. And your campaign to like package something, it sounds very targeted. That kind of effort would not just be for a random list of 100 people. You had to be thoughtful about who you send it to. So a lot of the effort here is being strategic before you pull like a plan together. It's about knowing why you're doing it and then measuring the results. In your case, the results sounded excellent, Kris. Like, you would do this again if you needed to do it more. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but you're like, I'm sure you could find ways to make it a little more efficient. So I'm curious, wave your hand if you've got a story about what became possible because you are an author. Like, what doors opened to you that you maybe didn't even realize you'd have access to, but because you're an author, something became possible, an introduction, an invitation of some kind. Pam, I'm going to come over to you.
Well, there's the usual ones, like in being invited to speak. I got a wonderful invitation to speak that was fabulous at my alma mater at Stanford Business School about my first book, which I had nearly, not forgotten about, but I wasn't on this circuit anymore about. And people were like, go on this book. So who knows, I might launch the 3rd edition of it. But I'll tell you a really odd one, but it was very personally meaningful. I got an email from an executive in Doctors Without Borders that she was changing her role. She was joining that leadership team, and this book made such a difference for her that she reached out and just let me know that. Well, I was planning a trip with my 16-year-old to go to Amsterdam, where they're headquartered. And I said, I'm going to be there. He's so interested in world affairs and all of that. Might it be possible for us just to visit the office? And she was like, come on in. And she showed us around the Doctors Without Borders office and really inspired my team. So that was an opportunity I never could have imagined.
That's so cool. I actually just realized I've not shared on air my answer to this question. My first book is about networking at conferences, and it came out in 2017, and that was the focus of my business, was speaking about networking at conferences. And I was doing it. I was making a little more money every time. I left my day job at the end of 2014 to focus on that full time. Podcast, book, coaching program, wrote for Harvard Business Review, did a TEDx talk. TEDx talk comes out in January of 2020. No one needs to know about networking at events 2 months later because we're all at home. But fast forward to fall of 2022, NPR reaches out to me because they want to interview me on one of their podcasts about networking at events. And suddenly the IP from that first book and the TEDx talk are everywhere. I mean, globally finding it, people talking about it in Germany, and it's amazing. And like, no, I mean, I joked that I was not just like overnight success 10 years in the making. It was an overnight success 10 years and a pandemic in the
Right.
making. Like I need a little bit of a pause. But even though, much to your point, Pam, I don't speak or regularly promote or do social media about my first book at all, it's the book that I have companies reaching out and booking me to speak and doing virtual programs at my best fees. I'm getting podcast interviews at like Amazon Small Business Podcast or NPR or things like that, getting involved with large foundations. So it's just really cool that the content exists. And even though people may know you for other reasons, that's maybe the reason they most need you right now. So I think this is really neat. Anyone else have because Ari, come on and tell us about your.
Yes, I'll just add something, a little bit here. I know you both talk about external impact from the book, right? I actually have internal impact from the book. So I felt like this year, my team and I were really struggling a bit trying to figure out like, how do we package our services? Because everything is just like all across the board. So we didn't really have like a good, I guess, like structure in terms of like how do we provide services lists or packages that makes the most sense. And then we went back to our book just trying to figure out like, hey, actually everything stems from the book. So it just became clear to us like, what is our offering ladder look like beginning with the book? So it just makes the most sense. So I just felt like the book just has been giving really interesting way of thinking for us, like new opportunities, new ideas as well, right? I think you could do so much with it, but again, everything starts with a book.
A lot of times there's clarity in writing a book. It helps you create a framework. There could be something you've been speaking about or coaching people through for a very long time, but you've never really documented and created a step-by-step process or framework or a model or whatever you might be using. And having the book and a good developmental editor or writing coach can really help. And I'm neither of those things, but I'm willing to have a brainstorming call with someone who's still thinking about writing a book, because I'm a strategist through and through. And I hate when authors write books without an audience in mind or a plan for how it works their business. I'm like, you just took all that time to create something with no market behind it. And it's the worst when you work really hard on an offer, whether it's a book or a program or something, and then you bring it to the marketplace and they're like, who are you? What is this? I don't know. I don't need this. And you're like, oh man, that is not, And so I also think part of this is that it's easy to find someone who will print your book, but it's harder to find someone who will make sure your book is a success. Like you can find someone who'll just be happy to hit print. But that's not the same thing as it being a quality book with an audience in mind. So speaking of which, we're going to talk about all the ways, we've had, all of you, sounds like you've all had teams or people involved. Like none of us do this solo. I think there's this like misnomer that authors like just sit there clackety clacking at their keyboard in complete solitary confinement. And maybe that's sometimes how some people get the content out of their head. But I love how, Kris, you were talking about other ways to kind of pull the material together and repurpose it. In a moment, I'm going to be asking each of you to share your advice. I'm going to start with Kris on this one. What advice would you give someone writing a book to help them grow their business? Whether they're speaking, coaching, consulting, they created some sort of online program. What advice would you give? And first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Kris, lay it on us. What kind of advice do you got?
Yeah, I'd say three things. The first is definitely to clarify your goal. Like, what is your goal for your business? What is your overall goal for your business? Set aside the book. And what is your strategy? And how will a book help you achieve that goal? So not just what is the goal for the book, but really thinking, how is that book going to be in service to helping you achieve your goal for your business? The second thing is, thinking about what is your big idea? What is that big idea of the book? Kind of who's the target audience, but what's the big idea of what you want them to be able to do or accomplish as a result, and getting really, really clear on that. And then third is, as you just were talking about, getting help. I mean, I think it's really important to recognize that we all need to invest in ourselves as business owners, as consultants, as advisors. I advise my ultra high net worth billion-dollar, multi-hundred-million-dollar clients that they need to invest in themselves. It's something that we all kind of forget we need to do, but it's important. We need to invest in, if it's consultants like you, Robbie, or if it's, copy editors or ghostwriters or marketing, social media specialists, digital marketing, whatever it is, but to really make sure that you have a plan to get the help that you need, build on your strengths, shore up where you don't have quite the strengths, and really position that book to be as successful as possible.
I love it. And as you were talking, I was trying to remember which author shared this, but on a panel recently, someone talked about Henrys. Have you ever heard the term Henry? High earners, not rich yet. So I was like, ooh, yeah, I like that too. I love when people come up with fun acronyms. Pam, I'm going to come over to you. I'd love to hear what advice you'd share with someone writing a book to help them grow a business.
Yeah, I'd say to arm your best, the people who love and know you for years, maybe love is a little strong, but the people who know your work and are really champions of you, and they themselves are well networked. And arm them with everything they need to be an ally in growing your book. So for us, that means over time, have the conversations about, I'm thinking about the book. Here's the idea. What are your thoughts? Who would you think of to ask for key testimonials in the book? And keep them engaged. Start sharing some of the stories coming across. Here's what happened on the client executive team that used the book. And arm them up, because then when we go together to a dinner party, to a conference, to whatever, they introduce me around as, here's my colleague Pam, who has this amazing book about teams, and I think you'd love the chapter on executive teams. You should get it.
It's true. Word of mouth is the best thing, right? How can you help people do more word of mouth on your behalf? Like, make them the evangelists, but make it so easy and seamless that they don't feel like it's not a heavy lift. It's just like the way they think to introduce you. They have the right words. That's awesome. I love this. And Ari, let me come over to you. Let's hear your advice as well.
I feel like everybody has given such great advice. My advice really, make sure you consider what it is that you want to be known for, right? Because the book is just like a small piece of representation of you, but because it's distributed so widely and people can have access to it, your identity is going to be tied with the book itself. So if you write a book about, teams like Pam's, it really ties directly into that particular expertise. So whatever it is that you're going to write about, just make sure that you are clear that this is what you want to be known for.
I love it. And how can people find you and follow your work?
I'm on LinkedIn. Find me on Krzyzek on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram.
Fantastic. By the way, we're going to put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Let's go over here to Kris. Kris, how can people find you and follow your work?
Yeah, you can find me on my website. It's Putnam-Consulting.com. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and TikTok. Kris Putnam-Walkerly.
Brilliant. We're going to put those links and your book links. And then Pam, what about your links? How can people find you and follow your work?
altusgrowth.com, and especially LinkedIn. That is where I hang. And I think I'm the only Pam Fox Rollin.
Fantastic. So at BizBook Publishing Hub, you're going to find the show notes from today's episode. You also find more than 50 experts who can help guide entrepreneurs through the journey of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing their business books to become successful authors. You'll also find the invitations to their virtual networking events. These are free virtual networking events for writers and authors to happen throughout the year. And you'll check out the Kindle cross-promotion campaigns that either we'll be running at the time that you check, we'll be adding authors to at the time that you check, or we'll have our wait list for the next time we're running it. 99-cent books, dozens and dozens of them, nearly 100 99-cent books. It's amazing. What a great deal. So go to bizbookpublishinghub.com to check all that out. And panelists, thank you so much for such an amazing conversation.
Thank you for all the work you do.